Okay, hi folks. So I'm going to look at a tutorial today where we have a character that can move left and right and can jump, and then when you hit the character's special button, they turn into a different character. And this different character will have a different type of movement. So we're not just looking at changing the graphics for the player, we're actually looking at changing the player itself along with the way of movement. All right, let's jump in. So I'm going to go ahead and open a scene that I have set up that just has a basic tile map. And on that tile map, we have a ground and a tile map collider on that ground. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Kenney.nl and I'm going to go to the tools and the creature mixer. In this creature mixer, I'm going to go ahead and create one of these little sprite characters, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that sprite sheet. And once I've saved that sprite sheet, I'm just going to drag it into my folder that I've created for this project. So I've got that already set up right there. Once I've done that, I'm then going to go to the assets portion of the Kenney website, and I'm going to search for Tappy, and I'm going to find the Tappy plane. And I'm going to download this resource packet. And once that's downloaded, I'm going to also drop that into my folder where I'm using all my assets for this project. Okay. Now that I have those, I'm going to do the usual process that I've done in all of the tutorials so far, where we take the sprite sheet, we set it to multiple. I like to set my pixels to 16 or 8. I'm going to use 8 for this one. And I'm going to set my filter mode to point no filter. And I'm going to change the format to RGBA 32-bit. Once I've done that, I'm going to hit apply. And then I'm going to go into the sprite editor. In the sprite editor, I'm going to want to trim this. So I'm going to go up to slice, and I'm going to say grid by cell count. And once I'm doing grid by cell count, I'm going to do 4 columns and 1 row. And then you should have something that looks kind of like this, and you'll say slice, and those red lines will turn to white lines, and we will have cut this character into these different pieces of the animation. And then you can click apply and close this. I'm also at the same time going to set up my planes sprites. So I'm also going to set those to multiple. The scale that's been working for me is 24 pixels per unit. I again say point no filter, and I again set this to RGBA 32-bit. I hit apply. I go into the sprite editor, and this is where it's a little finicky. So what I did was I went to grid by cell count, and I believe I did 8 rows and 3 columns, or something along those lines, or maybe it was 88 width by 73 high. And then I found that I needed to do some nudging to make sure that I was getting the right cuts around my red planes, because I'm only going to be using my red planes. When I was done with that, I say slice, I hit apply, and I close. And I now have these 2 sprite sheets all set up and ready to go. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to drag our creature sprite into the scene. It's going to prompt for a new animation, and I'm going to call this blueChar for blueCharacter animation. I am going to set this to have the position of 0, 0. And this is important because when I'm respawning it, I want it to spawn at its origin being 0, 0. So I'm going to make sure that that's correct. I'm also going to change its name to blueCharacter. And I'm going to add some components to this. So a lot of the usual components that we've done before, I'm going to add a poly collider 2D. I'm going to add a move with arrows. I'm going to set that move with arrows to be WSD because that's what I prefer. I'm going to set it to have only horizontal movement left and right. And I'm going to ask it to orient to direction, and I'm going to set that to right because my character is looking at the right by default. And after I do those things, I'm also going to add jump. I'm going to leave jump with the default spacebar. I might turn this down just a few to 8. I'm going to make sure that check ground and ground tag are on. And while we're at it, let's make sure that our tile map is tagged as ground. There we go. That's properly tagged. And it would be a good idea to tag our player as our player. Okay. Once I have that all done, I'm going to drag the blue character into my folder. And I'm going to have then created it as a prefab. I've been getting a animator controller error on this project a little bit. It hasn't affected anything, and I haven't figured out what's causing it. So you're going to see that pop up a little bit today, and I don't think it's going to affect us. Okay. So here we go. I've got this character working. I'm going to go ahead and hide that, and I'm going to do a similar thing with the plane. But this case, I'm only going to use these 3. So I'm selecting those 3 red planes, and I'm holding the control key. So I'm selecting multiple, and then I'm going to drag those into the scene. And that's going to be my red biplane. I'm also going to set this to be at 0, 0. And I'm also going to give this a lot of the same things that I just did to the character. I'm going to give it a poly collider. I'm going to give it move with arrows. And I'm going to change that to WASD. We want to make sure both the character and the plane are using the same keys. It would make sense to have the plane move faster than someone who's walking or running. So I'm going to increase that speed just a little bit. But I'm also going to set this to be only horizontal. I do want it to orient to direction still, and the direction is still right. But now instead of adding jump, I'm going to add a second move with arrows. And I'm going to have this second move with arrows also use WASD, but only be vertical. And I'm going to turn down the move speed so that I'm moving more slowly when I'm moving up and down, but I'm moving faster left and right, which makes a lot of sense to me for this type of plane. I'm leaving oriented direction turned off, and that should be working. Now I need to make this a prefab as well. I'm going to change the name of this to red biplane. And I'm going to drag it into my folder to turn it into a prefab. I'm going to collapse my sprite sheet because I'm not going to be using it. And now, and this is really key, I'm going to delete this character from my scene. I should also I should have tagged this as a player as well. And then let's delete this from the scene, like I said. Okay, I had hidden my blue character. I'm going to turn my blue character back on, and let's just do a quick play test. Okay, so I can move left and right, and I can jump. Okay, sounds good. Now, I'm going to select the blue character in my assets so that when I add this to the prefab, it is automatically added onto the prefab, and I don't have to push it from the scene onto my prefab. But it's always a good idea to save. So I'm going to say file save as. I'm going to go into my scenes folder, and I'm going to overwrite this setup file for this Playground 14 tutorial that I'm working on. Okay, so I have that operating, and now I want to set up the character switching. So with my blue character selected in the project, I'm going to add component, and I'm going to add a condition, which is basically an if statement, and it's going to be a condition key press. So when I push a key, something's going to happen. Now I'm using the WASD keys, and so I'm going to use E. So I'm just hitting E until I get down to E, then I hit return. That locks in E, and that is going to allow me to have other things happen. So when I press E, something happens. And that something is going to be create object action. So I am going to create a red biplane, drop it right there, at 0, 0 relative to this object. Now both characters have a 0, 0 for their origin. So this basically means that the red biplane will pop into being where my character is. Now, what I've found is that when you turn from a character into a flying character, it is kind of nice to have a little bit of a bump in how high you are, sort of like jumping in the air to turn into a plane. So I'm going to set that to be 1. And once that's done, I can then add a second action, which will be destroy action. And that destroy action is going to destroy this object, which is my blue character. So condition key press. If E is pressed, first create the red biplane, and after you've created the red biplane, destroy the blue character. Let's do another playtest. There we go. I can jump, I can move back and forth, I can jump again because ground is marked. And when I jump, I can also change into a plane and I can fly back and forth. I can go up, I can go down with the plane, but right now I can't turn back. If I hit E, I can't turn back into the character. So let's get turning back into the blue character to work. So I select my prefab of my plane and I set all of the same settings that I just did on the blue character. We add a component of condition key press. We make that key the E key. We add the action of create object action, but we now say spawn the blue character at 0, 0 relative to this object. And then we also add the destroy action for destroy this object. If I have all of those things working, I should now be able to press play again. And I should now be able to turn from a character into a plane, from a plane into a character, from a character into a plane, etc. So one of the things I notice whenever I'm switching from character to character is my red biplane seems to start rolling backwards. And I'm not sure if that's because it's momentarily for a microsecond colliding with the blue character before the blue character is destroyed. So one of the things that I do here is I also add, let's actually just collapse these so we can see everything. In addition to all of these actions, I add one other action, which is auto move on the plane only. And I set that auto move to be 1 in the X, which means moving forward according to where the plane's propeller is. So it has a natural desire to start moving in a forward direction. It's pretty subtle, actually. That's interesting. Typically, I feel like that's been a little bit more push. But you can see I'm no longer moving backwards. I'm now more likely to move a little bit forwards. But that's it. This is a pretty simple, when it's explained, it's a pretty simple tutorial, but it's a pretty complex idea. Changing the character, which allows you to change the movement controls on your character. So it's also possible that you could do something like changing from a blue character to a blue character that's twice as large and therefore moves twice as fast or jumps twice as high. Or it could be that you're having other things that you're deciding that you want to affect. Speed, scale, quickness of a turn, something along those lines. So hopefully this is a useful tutorial to you. If you've got any problems, please leave those in the comments and I will see if I can help you out in getting this to work. But hopefully this is pretty simple and it's pretty useful. Thanks a lot for watching.